Hey, what's up? What's going on? Hercules, and about to do a book review. These are my top 5 books that I recommend for every black teenager to read before they graduate from high school. All right, so this is great list, and I've seen a couple of book reviews going on around YouTube. But however, haven't seen nobody do anything for awaken the consciousness of the black teenagers. All right, so let's get it started. First book on the list, Critical Lessons in Slavery by Dr. John Henry Clark. Yo, this is a great book by Dr. Clark. And if you don't know who Dr. John Henry Clark is, please Google his name, Yahoo his name, look him up on YouTube. He got some lectures on there. This book right here is a great book. I really enjoy reading it. It's like essays on what happened during the era of the slave trade, the slave trade. And he puts together these essays. And one thing that I like about it is that at the end of each chapter, he has questions, like a school textbook that you can discuss, with your child after they finish reading. They have questions that you get the answer and stuff. I think that's cool. So it's a couple of essays that's put together by other authors that he put this book together. Like Sterling Stuckey is in here and Lloyd Best is in here. This is a great book, and it's good to start your teenagers off with, and get them reading and get them studying history on the African slave trade. Say slave trade, we really got to stop saying that word. We should say the Ma'afa that Master Marima Ani has taught us to say. But yeah, this is a great book to start off with, and to get them discussing what happened and things going on. All right. The next book, which I'm pretty sure everybody's heard of and you've all seen before, so a couple people do reviews on, is The Destruction of Black Civilization, Chancellor Williams' book. Yo, this is a phenomenal book. As you can see, my book is all beat up. I had this book ever since I was in high school. I've read it, and this is a great book. It's an overview of African history, and it talks about the mistakes that our ancestors made and the mistakes that we continue to make today as people, as black people. In fact, real quick, I'm gonna quote what he said at the end, where he says that the subtitle of this book, Great Issues of Race from 4500 BC to 2000 AD, has people puzzled. 2000 AD? Because this book came out in 1987. All right. So he continues that the end of this century. That is the end of the century, and we are not there yet. This subtitle, however, not only reflects the author's conviction that the main obstacles which confront us in the past and are with us today will still be with us in the year 2000. Yo, he wrote this joint 1987, so imagine he was doing the research at least 10 years before that. And now it's 2019, and the same problems that we're going through in the black community, the same problems that we're having with our people, was the same problems that our ancestors went through. And we haven't studied. Too many people haven't studied this book, haven't read it, study it, and look at the analysis that he made. So that's why it's very important. It's great to have every black teenager need to be reading this book before they graduate from high school. They need to study it so they can understand the mistakes that we made, so we can move beyond that. You know what I'm saying? All right. Now, the third book I want to mention, I don't have it with me because just like The Destruction, it's got all beat up, and that's Ancient Egypt Revisited by Ivan Van Sertima. Yo, beautiful book. Love that book. It was a great read. I had that book back in high school. I remember reading that book, and I was the antagonist in the history classes. Every time the teacher said something wrong that wasn't right, I would bring the book like yo, look, here's the evidence. But anyway, Ancient Egypt Revisited. This book, you just looked at the overview. Gave y'all the overview of African history. Ancient Egypt Revisited is the concise history on ancient Kemet. Okay, and just like Europeans, just like white people, they study Ancient Greece, classical Greece is their foundation. Kemet is our foundation. It's our classical era of philosophy and thought, and that's what we have to study and to branch off of and expand and expound our thoughts on. But we haven't been doing that. So that book, Ancient Egypt Revisited by Amos Van Sertima, it goes into the dynasties of the pharaohs and the queens. It goes to an explanation of the science and the mathematics that they was doing back then, their understanding of the universe, their understanding of nature, the relationship between man and nature, the relationship between God, the creator, and man, the whole philosophy. It gets into that. It gets in great detail about how the ancestors thought, their religion, and their philosophical thought. So it's a great read to study and to look at. And so every black teenager should have read that book before they graduate high school. So by the time they get out into the world, the matrix is pulled off. All right, so that's the history part that we did. So now we're going to cover the psychology part. Yes, Dr. Amos Wilson. Yo, many of the elders, they would tell you that, you know, they're followers of Malcolm X, they were followers of Du Bois, and, you know, they Garveyites. Me, I'm a Wilsonist, man. Amos Wilson was the man. He wrote several books, all of them just phenomenal, and they all just mind-blowing. This book here, The Falsification of the African Consciousness. This book right here, he gets into explaining how European history has falsified our consciousness because it's basically just mythology. and it's crazy because I know people think like, no, I'm not oppressed. You know, we're not oppressed. I'm free. And as Dr. Amos Wilson always say, black people are free to do the wrong things. You know. So one quick quote, I want to just quote him real quick, where he says, to manipulate history is to manipulate consciousness. To manipulate consciousness is to manipulate possibilities. And to manipulate possibilities is to manipulate power. Bam. I think that's pretty deep. Every black teenager in America should be reading this book right here. All right. And one of the things that he points out is that it's like when we read European history, we always presented, or like American history, we're presented as, you know, they were fighting for, the founding fathers were fighting for freedom. You know, they're trying to free themselves from terrorism, you know, the tyranny of the Britain. It's like what? Really? But y'all terrorized the Native Americans. They present that one-sided history, which gives a perception of who they really are. So that's why The Falsification of African Consciousness is a must-read for every teenager before they graduate from high school. It will help them to break through and see through the matrix. So when they go to college, they're ready and they're not continuing to be brainwashed and coming and graduating out of college with the Eurocentric mind thought. That mindset. It's time to have our black teenagers, our black kids grow up with an African mindset. All right. So that's why I put that book on there, and it helped open up their consciousness. So that's history. We deal with history, and Amos Wilson deals with psychology of the mind. All right. And in the last book, I want to talk about. I'm gonna try to do it briefly. It's kind of hard, and a lot of y'all know you haven't heard of it. It's called Muntu. All right, so we did history, psychology, and sociology right here. Muntu, African Culture and the Western World by Jahiz John. Okay, this book is a beautiful book. I put this book last because this book right here accumulates everything else that we just read. With Ancient Egypt Revisited by Amos Van Sertima, they go in great detail about African culture and the Kemetic religion, the gods and the spiritual beliefs of ancient Kemet. And when I was reading it, when I was in high school and I was reading it, it took me a long time to understand how they thought. Even after high school, I was still reading that book, and I was reading all these other books. I was trying to understand it and trying to grasp the African concepts and how they thought in the religious beliefs of our ancestors. This book brings it all together. It explains African culture in a nutshell. And I know what you guys thinking. What Africa? There are many African. No, There's only one African culture. When you take out the Arab influence and you take out the European influence, it doesn't matter. North or south, east or west, there's only one African culture, and he points that out. Dr. Marima Ani has recommended this book, and I picked it up right away because every time she says get a book, man, I've always gotten it. And I read it. Now, I'll be honest with you guys, the second chapter is on voodoo. And when I saw that, I was like, no. I skipped ahead and I finished the book. But then I heard Dr. James Small talk about the book, and I was like, oh my God. It was like this probably like a year later after I've read it. He talked about the book and he said, get it. And then I was like, all right. So I got over my fear and I picked up and I finished reading the chapter on voodoo. And my guys, I'm telling you, mine was blown. Because, like I said, it comes back to Amos Wilson. My conscience was falsified. It was falsified from what we learned from the Europeans, what we learned about voodoo and New Orleans, and stories we hear from New Orleans and Louisiana and Haiti. I've been devil worship or evil spirits. That's not what voodoo is about, and he points it out and he shows it that's not what it's about at all. It's an African word, all right, the airway language. You can say what's the word for God or what's the word for the creator. The word is voodoo. All right, so he talks about that in that book. He breaks down African culture, African philosophical thought, and how they think, and why our ancestors view the world the way they view the world. He gets into rumba, the Cuban dance. He talks about that. He goes into nomo, which is the word. Everybody talks about the word of God, and for our ancestors, for Africans, we call it nomo, the word, the power. And he just explains the concepts that they have. One of the concepts that he's talking about, he says that what we cannot conceive of is unreal. It does not exist. But every human thought, once expressed, becomes reality. All right? So, same thing the Dogon was talking about in the book The Pale Fox. Thousands of years before they met the Europeans, they understood that there were multiple realities, multiple different universes. This is African thought. This is a great book. I believe every black teenager should read this book before they graduate from high school, and it would help peel back the matrix and open up their eyes before they go to college and get bombarded with more Eurocentric thought. African philosophical thought is a great foundation for us to have before we enter college, because you just get hit with more Eurocentric logic and Eurocentric philosophy, and then they graduate thinking more towards Eurocentric thought. And it's time to let that go. We have empirical evidence for the past 60 years that following the Europeans, following the Western culture doesn't do us justice as black people. And we just look at the evidence. Anyway, those are my top 5 books that I think every black teenager should read before they graduate from high school. And I hope you guys like it. I hope you guys really enjoy it. Hit me up on Twitter. You want to follow me, you want to chit chat about it, got questions, just hit me on Twitter. All right, thank you.